the rise of gold and silver, what we've seen in the last 12 to 18 months, is just front running by insiders who know what's coming. Eric Sprott, I don't know anybody who studied the silver market better as an investor than Eric Sprott. He must be so frustrated because he put all this money in all these juniors, well, which starting to get a bit, but which haven't done anything good for him in years. And I wrote all the stuff he'd been writing in the last few decades. And he said a few times when silver really starts to break out because of these fundamentals, because of the physical shortages, you'll see $100 silver within a week.
Don't be swayed by the hype about the gold and silver rally. It's front-running by insiders who know a physical shortage is coming. Willem Middelkoop states it's now impossible to name 10 true silver companies, with even the biggest ones getting half their revenue from gold. This scarcity means a COMEX delivery failure is all it will take to trigger the endgame. Legendary investor Eric Sprott believes we could then see $100 silver in as little as a week. Over the last 2 decades, silver has experienced significant volatility, with notable gains during periods of economic distress and industrial growth. Global silver mine supply has contracted at a 0.9% compound annual growth rate since 2020, creating favorable conditions for strategic investments in the sector. According to Middelkoop, gold's surge has nothing to do with the Ukraine war. That conflict simply revealed something far bigger, which is the open weaponization of the US dollar. In response, Willem Middelkoop mentions the BRICS nations have weaponized gold, pushing the dollar-based system into the endgame he predicted in his 2014 book. The BRICS nations collectively control a significant array of natural resources essential to the global economy. Russia stands as the world's second-largest gold producer after China, giving the alliance significant influence over precious metals markets. Additionally, the expanded BRICS membership now includes major oil-producing countries such as Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the UAE, dramatically increasing the bloc's energy market footprint. Ultimately, central banks will be forced to print trillions more in the next crisis. The alternative is social and political breakdown, just like Germany's hyperinflation in the 1920s. According to Willem Middelkoop, we have reached the endgame. We see the clear signs of declining leadership, political dysfunction, and widening social tensions. The wealthy are voting with their feet, fleeing for havens like Singapore and Dubai. It's a stark indicator that the West is in decline, and the markets are pricing this global power shift as we speak. Before we dive into Willem Middelkoop's sharp insights from his latest interview, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss a moment when truth meets the market. Let's get into it.
Tom, give me 10 good silver names. It's hard to find 5 nowadays.
Exactly.
Even Wheaton PreciousMetals used to be a silver streamer. It's 50% gold now. Companies as First Majestic are 50% gold nowadays. So it tells you we're running out of silver. There's no silver there for mines to invest. And the US have been playing these markets and manipulating the precious metals by selling all these futures through the COMEX. But that game of musical chairs is ending now. The price discovery has moved from west to east. You might remember seeing that graph on X, that the major price movements in the monetary metals are now in the Asian trading hours. They used to be during the Western trading hours. So I think the musical chair game is ending, and one day we'll have this huge news coming from the physical metal markets that something blows up and somebody can't deliver. And I think the rise of gold and silver, what we've seen in the last 12 to 18 months, is just front running by insiders who know what's coming. And so we're in the very first inning, and things will start to get very, very interesting quite soon. And that's when the real big moves will be seen. Eric Sprott, I don't know anybody who studied the silver market better as an investor than Eric Sprott. He must be so frustrated because he put all this money in all these juniors, well, which starting to get a bit, but which haven't done anything good for him in years. And I wrote all the stuff he'd been writing in the last few decades. And he said a few times when silver really starts to break out because of these fundamentals, because of the physical shortages, you'll see $100 silver within a week. I don't think gold is over 3,000 because of the Ukraine war, although the Ukraine war showed the world that the US is ready to use the dollar as a weapon. So the weaponization of the dollar became much more serious. The weaponization of the dollar has always been there, but now it was so clear out in the open by confiscating or the financial reserves or locking them in. Because of the weaponization of the dollar, I think the other side of the planet, let's say the BRICS side of the planet, the eastern side, choose to weaponize gold. And this hasn't been talked too much about, but I think gold's being weaponized. You said in the intro that I'm the author of The Big Reset. The subtitle of The Big Reset is The War on Gold and the Financial Endgame. We're in the endgame now. That doesn't mean this is the end of the world, but it's the end of a financial system centered around the US dollar since the end of the Second World War, which is well over 80 years ago. We all know that on average, every 92 years, we're in for a big system change, monetary system change. Every 80 years, the fourth turning, we're in for a reset of the system, also from a social point of view. So there's so much happening now, which is way bigger than the Ukraine war. In a way, the Ukraine war is a proxy of the larger war between the US and China, the East, or BRICS. And this was the main thesis of the Big Reset, that we were reaching the end phase of this dollar system with the US as world's hegemon. And if you read the epilogue, the book can still be downloaded for free at our website. And if you read the epilogue, which was written around 2014, I wrote you can have two scenarios. Or the East and the West will keep working together to bring the international monetary system to the next phase in cooperation, or we'll get a conflict scenario, and wars have been started for less than the end of a monetary system after 80 years. And now we went from this era of cooperation to confrontation. And it's much harder for me to predict what will happen now because we have so many moving parts. The debasement of the currency, it's the growth of M2. When people always ask me, how can you be so sure that the gold price will keep rising? Well, because I know the money printing will keep on going. As long as M2 is growing, I know the gold price is just a proxy of the money growth. It's just going in tandem. Sometimes it's with shocks, but if you look at the long-term graph, it just follows the amount of money in the system. And I'm afraid
to your earlier point, the US dollar versus gold since 1971 has devalued by 99%, right?
Yeah, that was the point I made earlier. And I'm afraid that in the next crisis, central banks will start to really flood the system because that's all they can do. And that's when we get the real currency crisis, which I spoke of before. So you get a sovereign crisis because countries might not be able to finance themselves anymore. So then they need to run to the IMF. The IMF still hasn't used their balance sheet, so they can print trillions of SDRs. And central banks will need to print trillions and trillions of new money to handle these new crises, economic crises. Why? Because if they don't print the money, you'll have social crisis. And you'll have political crisis. For people who are interested in these phases where the money system becomes unstable, I read the book When Money Dies a few times. It's on the Weimar hyperinflation. This crisis became so severe in 1922 in Germany after the First World War, they couldn't find any politicians willing to be in the next government because as a politician, you're responsible for the mess. I see, if you look at the quality of governments in the US, in the West, Here in the Netherlands, we have a huge political crisis nowadays as we speak. The real smart people don't go into politics anymore. It's just the narcissist and the psychopath sometimes. So you can have a huge crisis on a political level, on a social level. You can have riots on the street. Look at the social imbalance in Europe with all the immigration. People are starting to get really stressed, especially when you enter an economic crisis. Mm-hmm. So this explains why many of the rich people, you see the same in Canada, in the UK, in Europe, rich people are leaving for Singapore and Dubai. And the West, at the start of this talk, you said that is very uncertain what will happen next. One thing is certain, the West is in decline, and the East and the Middle East is on the rise, I think.
The US dollar is heading for a sharp 2% monthly decline, pressured by mounting expectations of a September Fed rate cut and political risks tied to President Trump's attempt to influence central bank independence. The aggressive politics of Donald Trump are a symptom of a declining empire. As his actions push rivals and allies into the arms of BRICS, the US is revealing its weakness and its reliance on new assets, such as Bitcoin, to support its faltering financial system. Willem Middelkoop declares this as the endgame of the dollar, a prelude to a coming currency collapse, sovereign debt crises, and a larger war over who will dominate the next century. U.S. policy volatility and the prospect of slower U.S. economic growth have resulted in a decline in the value of the U.S. dollar since the beginning of this year. Interest rates on government debt in the U.S. remain elevated relative to those in other countries. There is scope for this differential to continue narrowing, resulting in further weakness in the U.S. dollar. While governments worldwide once aggressively pushed CBDC, the U.S. has now shifted. Under Trump, the U.S. has halted CBDC development and is promoting stablecoins instead. Middelkoop underscores that this path offers more personal freedom and a way to absorb treasury debt, a better option than the alternative. Let's get back to the interview.
In a way, it's a proxy. It shows you have a, let's say, weird, strange leader in the US, a weird president, which aligns perfectly with the end of an era. Look at all the other empires which failed in the end. The leaders in the end weren't the most stable and strong ones. So Trump is using all these bully politics. He needs to pressure all his trading partners more and more in a way which make all these trading partners feel very uncomfortable. And in a way, he's making enemies like India and China are natural enemies, but he's bringing them together because of all the tariffs. He's confronting to all these BRICS countries, and even Brazil is openly calling and doing calls with India and China because they want to unite even more because of all these bully politics by Trump. So in a way, it proves we're in the end game, and the hegemon, the US as leader of this financial system, as leader of the free world, is losing support even faster by applying more and more pressure. It shows the US is weak. It doesn't show the US is strong. If you're strong, you don't need this. And why is the US doing this? Because they know it's the end game. They know the budget deficit is that large. Something needs to be done. They know there aren't enough foreign buyers of US treasuries. So now they even have to promote stable coins because that's the buy of last resort out there. So now you reach a point where Bitcoin, which should be a competitor of the system, which should be an enemy of the financial system, Bitcoin is now needed to support the financial system because Bitcoin and stable coins is a central part of the digital economy. And the US is front running it. And you have a president with his family front running and milking the system. So it's such a weird time, and it's such an interesting time. But don't forget, the real crisis still has to start. The real sovereign crisis still has to start. The real currency crisis still has to start. The real social and political crisis still has to start, and the real economic crisis still has to start. And that will be all starting to unfold in the next few years. And I think that's the winter phase of the fourth turning stuff, the famous book by Neil Howe. We're in this crisis period where you get wars and tension, and the wars in the Middle East and the war in Ukraine are proxies for me for that larger conflict. It's all about who will rule the world for the next 80 to 90 years. It always surprised me that people reacted so strongly on central bank digital currency, which is quite technical to understand, but many people are scared as hell for central bank digital currency. And I always try to explain it's just one next level on top of a fiat money system, in which you really build a all digital fiat money layer. So it's more of the same, and it only supports my thesis that you need to get out of fiat as much as possible. Of course, I keep some cash, but just enough to pay the taxes. You better keep your liquid assets in other forms. But if we study central bank digital currencies, I think the situation a few years ago was much more alarming, because then we were in the situation that you could say that most of the world was preparing for central bank digital currency, where government was totally in control on the money supply, but also on how you would spend your money, how you would be allowed to spend your money. And China was, of course, the best example. And then we knew the ECB was very active and pushing their engineers to be ready as soon as possible. And the Federal Reserve was on the same track. But now when Trump arrived, and that was the good thing about the Trump administration, although they're doing all this weird stuff now, but they stopped the censorship, with the big tech companies. They stopped that censorship. They stopped the debanking. They stopped the fight against Bitcoin. But they also stopped central bank digital currency. Trump has made it very clear we won't have a central bank digital currency, and he's going the other route. He's going to the stable coins route, and the stable coins will be huge buyer of the treasuries. And I think for us as investors, but also as citizens who think our personal freedom is important, most people. Let me be clear, most people are better off with this administration for their personal freedom than with the other side. And of course, what's happening with the immigrants, these people feel, of course, less freedom, and we've seen some appalling scenes where people are picked from the streets who have done nothing criminal. They might be illegal, but I think that's not a reason to start a razzia to pick them from the street when they're going to Walmart to get a house fixed for somebody who's paying for that. So I'm not a big supporter of the Trump camp, but I always want to point out we need to be fair. And one of my main worries was the censorship, which was creeping into our Western society through the big tech. And well, he solved that problem for 90%.
Silver remains a compelling asset for diversification in 2025 and beyond, supported by industrial innovation, underlying supply constraints, ongoing deficits, and its proven value in times of monetary and inflationary disturbances. Despite recent headwinds from tariff-related developments, silver's long-term outlook remains constructive. If the world is indeed entering the endgame of the dollar era, are you prepared to protect your wealth in real assets before the final reset arrives? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below. If you find this video informative, don't forget to support our channel and turn on notifications to stay informed about our latest videos. See you in the following video.